What if I told you I only exist as a figment of your mind, just a headless voice created by you for your entertainment? What if I told you nothing beyond your senses exists, and that all the universe was created for you and you alone? What if everyone you know isn't actually alive, and that you are the only real person? What if I could prove this to you? Today, we're going to be covering 5 of the strangest philosophies that I've found. Number 1. Solipsism. Solipsism is the idea that the only thing that we can fundamentally know is our own perception and experience. It suggests that there is no conclusive way to prove that others have consciousness and are alive much like you are, and that all things beyond your senses are an illusion. We only assume that the human beings we perceive possess consciousness akin to our own. We cannot really enter their minds and look at the world from their perspective. Therefore, how could we ever prove that they even have a perspective? Solipsism could suggest that the universe itself was created either by you or for you out of the depths of your imagination. Although solipsism doesn't typically concern itself with the matter of the divine. If this is the case, then many natures are possible. Your dreams, for example, could be the reality, and reality could be your dream. It could also be that when things leave your perception, they simply disappear, and only exist when they reappear in your life. You may be thinking by now that a pure solipsist could potentially be a very dangerous figure. If no one is real, and therefore their feelings and experiences aren't real, then how we treat others may not have any sort of ultimate moral implication. The solipsist could treat the illusion how he or she likes. They are the only one who is truly alive, after all. There is a problem with this argument, however. If reality is an extension of your mind, then reality could only ever be filled with things that you already know. It assumes that you, on some level, know all things, and that nothing new could ever be taught to you. But others raise us and teach us things, so either these illusions are more than just an extension of your mind, or they have a consciousness just like you do, and reality is more than just a selfish depiction of what we want it to be. Number 2. Ontological nihilism. So, if solipsism is the belief that everything within the universe is an illusion of the solipsist's mind, then ontological nihilism takes that a step further. As I'm sure many of you know, nihilism is the belief that life has no inherent meaning, whereas ontological nihilism is the belief that there is simply nothing at all. This is a very complicated philosophy with many arguments and counterarguments within it, so I hope that I'm understanding it and can explain it in a simple manner. An argument could be made that it is ultimately impossible to prove the existence of anything, including your own existence. According to the ontological nihilist, arguing against ontological nihilism is fruitless, considering that if there is nothing, then there is no argument against it. You might say, but wait a minute, there's at least an appearance of things, or an illusion of things, according to the solipsist. So the appearance in and of itself must disprove this viewpoint. The ontological nihilist would argue that an appearance or an illusion of things is no more real than an illusion of an apple being a real apple. You might also say that this philosophy contradicts itself, in that if there is a fact that nothing exists, the fact that the fact exists falsifies ontological nihilism. The nihilist, however, would argue that ontological nihilism considers even the philosophy's own existence to not be real. Therefore, there isn't even an argument for ontological nihilism in the first place, because, well, how could there be if nothing exists? To be quite honest, it seems sort of a strange circular type of logic, not one that would have any practical implications in the real world. Number 3. Anti-Natalism. Regardless of the true nature of things, it is a good general consensus that we humans experience a varying degree of pleasure and pain every single day, with death looming at the end of our life. So why then are we born in the first place? Well, without our consent, our parents made the decision to have us and brought us into this world knowing the inevitability of our suffering and death. Anti-Natalism argues that this decision, was the wrong one. It says that the sum of pain is greater than the sum of pleasure, and that it is better to have not existed at all. They ask the question, isn't the absence of pain better than its presence? Now, I want to be clear. The decision to not have one's own children for financial or philosophical reasons is not the same as believing that having children is innately immoral. Someone might not want to bring another life into this world as it is now, but may believe that society will improve enough to justify having them in the future. A pure anti-natalist would believe that human existence as it is on its own is enough to justify the belief that anyone having children ever is immoral. In addition, anti-natalism doesn't just consider the individual's possibility of pain, but says that since we are already here, we have a responsibility to choose other children who are currently alive and in need of help over ones that do not exist yet. It considers other species who live alongside us as well, and the suffering that is caused as a result of our expansion. Anti-natalism is under the assumption that pain and suffering, and therefore existence, is inherently bad, and that pleasure is inherently good. It does not consider that sometimes challenges and tribulations can teach us lessons, and ultimately bring out goodness and a positive evolution of morality and attitude once it has been overcome. It also doesn't consider that based on the International Happiness Index, most individuals are experiencing above-average happiness across the globe. Anti-natalism also assumes that the rarity of our level of consciousness is not important and non-essential. It may just be that the sum of pleasure in life is greater than the sum of pain. It may also be that one day we can live in this world and stunt the negative impacts on the environment from human expansion. Number 4. Trivialism. Now, what if I told you that all of the statements on nature and morality that we have covered so far are both true and untrue? What if I told you that any stance that you take is the correct one? How is this even possible? Trivialism is the argument that any proposition put forth is true. I could say, I am nothing more than just a voice, and I could also say that I'm more than that. I could even say something as ridiculous as, I am a banana, and that it is possible for me to argue that this is the case. Trivialism uses a particular line of logic to make that argument. First, to understand this logic, we need to understand the difference between philosophical actualism and possibilism. Actualism essentially says that everything we perceive is real or actual, and that any imagined thing is simply that, just imagined. Possibilism says that other worlds possibly exist, simply because they are merely possible. So, if we assume that possibilism is true, then that means that there is a world where everything is true. In that world, the statement that that world is identical to this one is true. And if that is true, wouldn't that mean that in this world everything is also true? That's pretty crazy. Much like the ontological nihilist, arguing with a trivialist is also fruitless. They would simply agree with everything that you say. The problem is, in order for this to work, we need to first believe that the simple possibility of a world where everything is true is enough to say that that world exists, and I find it particularly difficult to prove that. Saying that there are statements that are both true and untrue goes against our understanding of classical logic. I think that it is safe to say that most of us agree that things are either true or not. And if we cannot agree on what is true, then we simply do not understand enough about a statement or subject to come to a conclusion that either is the case. Number 5. Panpsychism. We can very likely agree that I am not in fact a banana, but interestingly enough, there is some real discussion as to whether a banana has consciousness. Science has yet to understand what consciousness really is. We only know that we are thinking and living creatures with an acute level of self-awareness. Logic could tell us that there are two possibilities as to why our consciousness exists. There is materialism, which suggests that the complex evolution of our brains has led us to developing that which we call consciousness. And then there is dualism, which suggests that consciousness has existed and that our brains may act as sort of an antenna in which we channel it. In a nutshell, either the physicalness of our brains has developed to become conscious, or the mind and matter are two separate things. Panpsychism offers a third option. It suggests that consciousness exists and has always existed fundamentally within all matter, and that we simply have developed to have a higher concentration of that consciousness. In other words, consciousness would exist throughout the universe whether we humans are here to experience it or not. Now, this does not mean that the banana is self-aware. It merely suggests that individual points of matter that make up the banana have some form of rudimentary consciousness. And when this matter is organized in such a way, such as a brain, that consciousness can begin to become higher functioning. You might say that panpsychism sounds a lot like animism, or that seemingly inanimate objects possess a soul. But panpsychism does not necessarily consider the soul in its thought process, just the nature of consciousness. You might also wonder why other objects don't become self-aware from time to time, considering the chaotic nature of things. It may be so rare that it is just unlikely. But to be honest, that is just my own silly conscious brain asking its own silly questions. There are a lot of strange ways of thinking out there, and there are definitely more than just 5 strange philosophies. If you want me to make another video about the strangest philosophies, leave suggestions in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button and that bell, and I'll see you in the next video.